Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders. This is the show where I speak with the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today I'm joined by a shero of mine. Her name is Sam Allen, and she is managing director for Sam Allen Associates. Sam originally trained as a nurse before pursuing a career in industry with Sainsbury's PLC, Dunhill and Greene King, the latter of which she was on the board. She then held key leadership positions at Whitehead Mann and Boyden. Sam also holds an MBA and an MA in employment law. She's a fellow of the CIPD and an accredited commercial mediator. She's also on the judging panel of HR Magazine's most influential list. Incredibly, Sam was on the board at Greene King PLC at the age of 29 years old. And there were 68 people in the board and senior management group at the time. Every single one of them was a male. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is an honor to have you here with me today. And you know what would be amazing for those of our listeners who perhaps don't know you as well as I personally do is if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to be at the helm of your own organization and frankly doing all the roles that you have to date, which I just think is phenomenal.
Thank you, Leila. You're making me sound much grander than I feel I actually am. But, you know, I have always been a very determined individual and I feel I've had a very lucky life, despite, you know, many people in life having the odd hiccup on the way. Currently, Sam Allen Associates hires chairman, non-execs and CEOs and direct reports to CEOs for FTSE 100 and FTSE 250 companies and also some amazing private companies. So we work for companies like Specsavers, like SSE, like the Co-op, like Visa, like Ted Baker, like BGL and Compare the Market. We work across all sectors and we've in the last 12 months undertaken 6 board effectiveness reviews, which has really given me some fascinating input during this period. In terms of how I got here, I was the child at school that was told not to do GCSEs and not to do A-levels, and I was the child at school that my mum pleaded with them to let me sit them. Academics wasn't my strong point. Whilst all my friends went off to university, as you rightly said, I went off to be a nurse. And although I carried on nursing whilst I studied for the CIPD, I decided to go for a career in sort of management and leadership within retail and join Sainsbury's. There's nothing special about me other than I'm very determined and I like to learn from all setbacks. In 2000, I was diagnosed with HIV. That was a massive blow to me as an individual. I have, you know, experienced in a very, very tiny form what it's like to be excluded in that group at that time, and had my doctor's records flashing red, had dentists that wouldn't take me on. So just a really interesting experience, which has definitely made me stronger. So I'm very lucky. I love what I do. I work with a great diverse mix of people who keep me in order. And I love learning, so delighted to be here.
Sam, I feel grateful that you are here, and it doesn't matter how many times I hear your story, it always makes me feel a certain way, and that is to see and hear what you've achieved in the short period that you have is just quite phenomenal. It would be great to find out a little bit more about some of the work that you're currently involved in. I'm sure that it is No, it's no walk in the park hiring some of the biggest names in global business, from CEOs to chairs to various other international candidates that I'm sure you've appointed in your time.
Well, we've just appointed the chair at SSE, FTSE 30 organisation, an amazing team of people at SSE, and we've worked in real partnership, and we worked on that assignment through all of the COVID lockdown period. And then we've also undertaken a range of other pieces of work for organisations, whether it's Dunelm, whether it is BGL Group, whether it's McCarthy and Stone. So we've been very lucky to have great variety as well.
If you don't mind me looping back a little to when you were talking about your journey to get to where you are right now. Obviously, you were the only female. How did you make it to that place as a female leader? And I know you may be thinking, well, it doesn't matter whether I'm a woman or whether I'm a man or whether I have three heads, but that must have had some kind of impact on you personally.
I think I've never tried to rely on and not a supporter of either the fact that I'm a woman and therefore I should have priorities above others. When I started at Greene King, the first week, one of the directors said to me, "Have you come to sort out the sandwiches?" And I said, what do you mean? And at that time, which was admittedly quite a long time ago now, dictated by my age as it currently is, there was still the brewery shut for sandwiches and beer at 10 o'clock every morning across the whole site, both head office and the brewery. And I think that the issue was there was a massive trade union issue associated with that. And that's what he's referring to in terms of me coming to sort out the sandwiches. I've always just got on and done the best job I can and relied on people who've been massive supporters. For whatever reason, having been quite a poor performer at school, as soon as I went to work, my career seemed to accelerate. So at Sainsbury's, I went very quickly from stores to head office. I worked any hour that was going for Sainsbury's, both day and night. At Dunhill, I worked in the UK initially and then had the opportunity to run projects in different parts of the world. And at Greene King, I was joined as part of the senior team, and then 6 months after that became part of the management board and was fortunate enough to go through all of the growth with them. Interestingly, I don't ever feel that I've been personally discriminated against, but I do think there's an awful lot that organisations can do to make diversity and inclusion much more on the agenda than it is at the moment. And I say diversity and inclusion because the two have to go together, in my view.
I absolutely concur. And on that point, and I love this question because it often breeds many different answers, but what does diversity truly mean to you personally?
Well, one, to be frank, it's absolutely about fairness at a ground level. Secondly, it's for me within a work context about having the best possible team. And the way I always think about this, which sounds rather simplistic, but if you imagine you're putting an orchestra together, if you just have people that play the violin, then you basically only appeal to a very tiny audience. If you have a diverse range of instruments, then you can do a diverse range of music and appeal to a much broader audience. And I think that about so many things, whether it's, the color of pencils, that, they're not, you get multicolored pencils, you get multicolored jelly beans, and all because it's innovative, it sells more, it adds more value. And I think you know, all the evidence shows, and I know McKinsey have done this report, that 33% of diverse teams will outperform their peers. And that's absolutely the case. So whether it's about whatever form of diversity, I think the more diverse the team, the more diverse the world, the closer you are to the consumer groups that you're serving, because that is the society we live in.
Indeed. And I love the fact that you talk about the statistics there, because actually this is not just about that boardroom environment. This is far and beyond. This is into wider society, including the consumers and the customers in which we serve. But I guess bringing it back to the boardroom, and obviously you've been incredibly successful in the world of global executive search. How do you feel that the role of exec search, and beyond that into other areas of recruitment, what should that play in terms of building those more diverse boardroom environments?
Well, I think it's our responsibility to educate and educate at the top of these organisations. So when we are briefed on assignments, we do challenge both the chairman and CEO and non-exec. And to be fair, I'm fortunate that the businesses I work with are very accepting of that. I'm sure there may be many others that wouldn't be. But for me, in a way, I get slightly frustrated by the badges that are assigned to whichever diversity club you belong to, whether it's to do with women or whether it's to do with ethnic minorities or whether it's to do with other groups, because I think it's about organizations really understanding the benefit of the orchestra. It's not about doing it to tick a box, have a badge. And ironically, as an organization, we have all the badges. But, if you actually, it starts with the search firm themselves being diverse. And I think if you look at our website, Leila, you'll see that we're very diverse. And it starts at the top, basically. So I think that it's our responsibility to educate the board on the fact they need an orchestra, not just a group of violins or a group of pianos. And when we do take briefs, it's our responsibility to challenge based on the journey, the strategic journey these organizations are on, their consumer group, and therefore what do they need to make sure they deliver a brilliant business plan and deliver on the strategy. And it isn't through having a group of pianos or a group of violins. So one is education. The other is, I think, search firms need to practice what they preach. So we absolutely have a diverse team ourselves. And the other thing is that when we are given a brief, and we're working with a great client at the moment who's given this brief, of course they would like an ethnic minority candidate who ticks every single other box that they put against the criteria. But the reality is that if you look at their board, if they could hire an ethnic minority candidate that could add real value to the organisation, then put that forward as an alternative suggestion, as opposed to just ticking specific boxes. If they have got a skills gap or they've not been a non-exec before, offer them training. We're actually now offering 6 months coaching for individuals that haven't done roles like that before to transition into NED roles. So I think you have to accept that, there can be compromises. And again, it's our responsibility to discuss those with a client, basically. It needs to be at the top of the board's agenda, not just something that's discussed sort of once a year. And it is about being embedded in the practices. It's about it being okay for everybody to go for a child's sports day. It's about everybody being aware that it's Ramadan and therefore there are individuals that will have specific requirements. It's not about just putting people into boxes. It's about creating a work environment that accommodates a diverse group of people.
This is what I love about speaking with you, Sam, is the way that you describe and bring colour to the words in which you use, and to your discussion and descriptors around certain factors is amazing. I agree, this is not about box ticking. It absolutely isn't. It is an understanding of the various different cultural idiosyncratic details through to the backgrounds that people come from, through to the visible and the invisible diversities, and ultimately the intersectionalities that really drives this initiative forward. But your point about this starting from the top and this starting in the boardroom is absolutely spot on. Now, there's been a lot of talk about unconscious bias training on boards, and I dare say this needs to head a little more towards conscious inclusion. But how prevalent do you see this bias, in inverted commas, on boards?
I do think that there are associations. If individuals look at CVs, if they see somebody that has gone to a non-red brick university, then they will make a decision based on that. If they see somebody that's not done a degree, they will make a decision on that. If they see somebody that went to the same university and were in the same halls as them at Oxford, and clearly I'm talking about occasional situations. I'm not talking about a lot of clients, but I do see it. It's people who put on their CV, they have a particular interest in rugby, and the interviewer has a particular interest in rugby. It's people who have a holiday home in a certain location, who again, that can skew something. It's somebody who's come from a different part of the country, and again, that can associate something. So I think I see it a lot. And we just need to be very wary of it, particularly because it does impact on whether people get through or don't get through to shortlist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's being confident enough to know that there are times to push back and times to really question that, because ultimately this is about equity over equality and understanding that people have different beginnings, middles, and ends to life and careers and such like. And so giving the opportunity, and whilst also understanding the skill sets of those individuals for their own merits, is absolutely critical. And I guess that's a nice segue into talking about diversity and how this works hand in hand with inclusivity. You said right at the beginning of our conversation that diversity and inclusion, and I'd love to add belonging and equity onto there as well, that they work together. How do you believe that organizations really can achieve this?
I think there needs to be a humility and a vulnerability that's shown, so that things like children's sports days, things like Ramadan, all sorts of issues that are accepted right at the top of the organization as being normal practice, basically. So rather than it being something in an employee handbook, or rather than it being an employee award, but actually lived and breathed out in the organization. I'm also slightly cautious of the emphasizing the commonalities of grouping people together in groups like BAME, etc., because really we should be delighted that we've got the diverse differences rather than just putting people together in boxes. So I'm all for not wanting people to be allocated in a box, but that everybody be treated as one. I think we do need to provide the right sort of support in the workplace, and that includes things like mental health, physical health. I mean, I don't think it can be underestimated, the impact of this COVID period on people's mental health, either because they've been very closely associated with somebody who's been very badly impacted by COVID, or just because they've been locked up at home, basically, and haven't had what their own personal needs are addressed. And I think that, again, mental health should be much more open, much more available, but again, supported from the top of the organization. So the CEO at the top of the organization should be the person sending these messages, not a memo round from the company secretary or even a memo round from the HR director. This needs to come right from the top, that we need to support you as an organisation. I'm a real strong believer that labels are for products, not people. There should be zero tolerance, absolutely zero tolerance for discriminatory behaviour in any way, shape or form. And if it's an organisation that absolutely follows that and adheres to that, fantastic. But you can't sort of have on your website and have values that we treat people equally and inclusively, but then actually just accept that, you know, well, it's the way it's always been, or it's the way the founders always operated. So I think that it has to be a zero tolerance approach. And diversity inclusion is not the HR director's job. It's not the job of the diversity and inclusion director. It's the job of everybody in the organization, irrespective of level. It's a bit like, you know, companies that hire strategy directors. It's everybody's responsibility in a senior leadership team to think about strategy. Like it's everybody's responsibility in the organization, irrespective of where they sit, to have diversity and inclusion at the top of their agenda.
Indeed, it is truly a board-wide initiative, and I'm so pleased that you said that about this not being a people initiative, because like yourself, I hear this time and time again. It's a people issue. It absolutely is not. This is a board-wide initiative. It is everyone's collective responsibility to drive this forward and move the needle in the right direction. Really pleased that you mentioned the terminology BAME, which of course for those listening who perhaps don't know means Black, Asian, minority, ethnic. There is some sense in understanding where individuals come from and their ethnic makeup, yet at the same time lumping all together in one small acronym is not necessarily the right way to go, because you know BAME can mean many different things. And as you've mentioned yourself, not only are there these different ethnic diversities, there's visible diversities, there's invisible diversities. You and to yourself are a leader, number one, a human being, in fact I should say number one, but also a woman, a mother, you know, you're a parent with caring responsibilities, the invisible diversities. You've very kindly and bravely, in my opinion, shared the fact that you have HIV. It's something which is invisible, and without finding out more about you, one would not know that unless they scratch below the surface. It's that richness of diversity and experience through life that ultimately makes you who you are and gives you the impact that you have in life and in the workplace. And before we wrap up for today, Sam, I would love to ask a couple of lightning round questions, if that's okay. I know that you listened to the podcast and checked out some of the podcasts beforehand, so I guess you'll know what is coming. But I'd love to ask a couple of quick questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Sounds scary, but yeah, no problem.
So the hardest one first then, and that is, what is your secret to success?
I have a desire to live life to its full potential and to never give up and to treat setbacks as opportunities. And like many people in society, I've been in some very dark places, and I'm very fortunate that I've been there, seen what it's like, come back again, and been able to support other people that may be visiting those. But I live every day as if it was my last. And if you ask my kids what would be on my gravestone, it would probably be that.
And what about any advice that you might give your younger self, if we kind of take a moment to imagine that you're back at school, or maybe you're thinking about the next steps, whether that be nursing or otherwise? What advice might you give to your younger self, or indeed someone who is in a similar situation?
My advice is more about a personal technique I've used when I've faced various setbacks and challenges through life. And, you know, human behavior, as we all know, can come in all different ways, shapes, and sizes, and sometimes not in a way that we wanted. And what I've tried to do through life, and again, my 2 children will probably be bored with hearing this, is that I believe that behind every behavior, there's a reason. So if somebody is defensive, or if somebody is angry, or if somebody is dismissive, behind that, there will be a reason. And so I think that's helped me get through sometimes the bumpier journey in life, where you've just sort of thought, what happened there? Or what did I do? Or how did that happen? So I suppose my younger self, I've learned over the years that behind every behavior, there is a reason. And, you know, I shouldn't jump to conclusions and assume that they are in the wrong, or that their behavior was unacceptable, basically, because you don't actually know the full story.
And finally, who has inspired you the very most throughout your career and indeed your life?
I think that has to be my parents. My dad always sort of, you know, well, in fact, both my parents, you know, life doesn't owe you anything. You get out what you put into it. You know, on the odd occasion where I sort of phoned and said, and I still remember actually phoning and asking my dad when I was 17 if he'd lend me some money for a car. And he said, absolutely not, basically. And I gave him the abuse that probably I was very capable of at 17, of all my friends' dads have, etc., etc. But that's the best thing he ever did, because it made me determined to build and grow through me rather than through relying on others. And you only get in what you put out. And also, you need to always treat people how you want to be treated. Never give up, and try and learn and grow from your setbacks and become a better person. Maybe it sounds a bit corny, but that's who I am, and I'm very grateful for being having the experience I had.
Well, it doesn't sound corny at all. Actually, I think it's real pearls of wisdom, actually, that your father clearly imparted on you, as did the family. And, you know, Sam, it's been an absolute, I mean, it's an honor and a pleasure speaking with you. Every time I speak with you, it is a joy. I personally always learn something. And I know those who are listening in today, whether you're listening in or whether you're watching on demand, will have been inspired by your personal story, but also the sheer tenacity and capability that you have shown throughout your career, and most notably as well, the impact ultimately that you make, not only in other people's lives, but also within that boardroom environment. You know, I love the fact that you really challenge the status quo. I love the fact that you have this incredible sense of humility with everything that you do, despite the fact that you really have reached the pinnacle, if there was one, in the exec search career. So thank you ever so much for being here today. It has been a joy, and I can't wait to speak with you again soon.
Well, listen, thank you, Leila, and keep up the fantastic work that you're doing, because the great thing about Dial, it is absolutely what it says on the tin in terms of endeavoring to really drive not just a tick box, but really make impactful change out there. And that's absolutely where I am as well. So really well done.
Well, we are humbled that you're Annette. So thank you, right back at you. My name is Leila Mackenzie-Dallas. I'm the founder and CEO of Dial Global. You've been listening to the superb Sam Allen of Sam Allen Associates. You can visit us at darglobal.org. You can also check out Sam Allen Associates online. I would absolutely encourage you to do so. If there is an exec search firm, and I do not say this lightly, because it is how I have been trained over the years, then absolutely, please check out the great work that Sam does. She truly cares. She brings a personal touch and personal service to everything that she does and everything she touches. We'll put all of the show notes into the end of today's show, all of the learning points. So if you feel you've missed anything, don't worry, you can rewind, you can repeat as many times as you wish. And we'll put all of Sam's details in there for you. In the meanwhile, thanks so much for listening. Take care, and we shall see you again very soon. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.